the book that got me into was The Fourth Turning. I don't know if you've read it, but it's not a Bitcoin book at all. But what it shows is the cycles that we go through, or showed the cycles
Oh
that
yeah,
America
I've
go
heard
through.
it. Yeah, yeah, I've heard about
Yeah,
these different cycles like that. Yeah, but explain
yeah.
it though
So
anyway. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
so you've got 80-year cycles, and it goes through periods of calm, and then you get periods of unrest. And then you get the fourth turning, which finishes the cycle and starts a new one. And typically at the end of the fourth cycle, you get something destructive. You get a war. A lot of people forget about it. So, for example, sending your first on-chain Bitcoin transaction. For me, I was so scared for 10 minutes. I was like, I sent it, and I was like, what do I do now? For 10 minutes, I was pacing around. I remember exactly where I was. And I was pacing around, and I was like, is it going to land? Like, is it going to show up here?
Welcome, Jordan Walker, to the Larpar Show, where we talk about what is money, what is coming, and how to protect your family. So, Jordan founded the Bitcoin Collective, which hosted the UK's first major Bitcoin conference, and his aim is to make Bitcoin education more accessible and less scary for the average person. His team is trying to build the largest Bitcoin community with their education platform Genesis, and he's going to share his story today. So, Jordan, how did you find Bitcoin, and how has it changed your life and mindset?
Amazing. That's a large question to open up with. Firstly, thank you for having me on here, and yeah, letting me tell the story. So how I'll split it into two. How did I find Bitcoin? I'll go with that first. And I started my journey like in cryptocurrency, as I think a lot of people can relate to. So 2017, I started dabbling and thinking that this was I was going to be a millionaire, and it was going to happen very fast. Little did I know. So this was around 2017, dabbling in lots of different cryptocurrencies. I couldn't even tell you the names of them now, and I don't think many of them are still alive today. Um, so I kind of lost interest after that because there was a big crash in early 2020 18. But at this point, bear in mind, I hadn't really done any research. I'd just seen numbers going up and down. And I think a lot of people at that time, like looking what's the price predictions and using other people to research. And I hadn't really done my own research and dug into like what cryptocurrency is and what Bitcoin was. So I kind of lost interest. And then around 2020 is when I started picking up interest again. And I was like, right, let's start doing some research. So I started researching all the cryptocurrencies, and eventually, as most people do, if they stick with it long enough, they kind of sift out all the other cryptocurrencies, and they're like, oh, well, there's this one here. Bitcoin is actually solving a problem. And I think that was the big one for me was what are these other cryptocurrencies? What problem are they actually solving? Um, and as I learned more, it was evident that Bitcoin was that one that was solving this problem that we've got with our monetary system today. So I was diving into that, and me and my brother-in-law started a podcast together. And the problem was we were always talking about America. America are doing this, America are doing that. And at the time, there wasn't much happening in the UK. So we get, what I like to say is, can I swear on here?
You can say, do whatever. It's open.
We had a fuck it moment. And we just on the podcast, we were like, right, well, let's do a conference in the UK. None of us, or neither of us, had experience in events. We'd ran small little events, maybe for like 50 people before. Um, and we were like, right, let's do it. And we chatted about this on the podcast, and it was quite amazing that we had emails after we put out that podcast saying, um, there were sponsors that were like, I want to sponsor this. Um, let's get in touch. Let's talk about this. And then we went out and asked some people in the Bitcoin space, if we put on a conference, would you come and speak at it? So the initial five we asked were Jeff Booth, Larry Lepard, Greg Foss, James Lavish, and Natalie Brunel. And we put it out to all five of them in one email. And we were like, guys, we want to do this. Would you come? And they all said yes. And they're like, don't worry about expenses or anything like that. We'll just come. If you're putting this on, we'll be there. And we were like, oh, okay, we actually have to do this now.
Yeah.
So we started investigating, like putting on conferences and bringing in a team to help us do this. And it kind of snowballed into the UK's first major Bitcoin conference. And that's kind of like what's now shaped the company as it is today. So that's a summary of how I found Bitcoin, and how it's like, and to be honest, like that's kind of segueing us into how has it changed my life. I now work full time in Bitcoin, and I run a Bitcoin company, all from just starting this one small podcast years ago, and just investigating, being curious, but actually taking people on that journey as well. Like I'm quite transparent in the way that I learn. Is like I'll say if I mess up, or I'll take people on that journey, because it's the journey that most people or a lot of people will go on in Bitcoin. Is they'll see this quick cryptocurrency, like this gone up this percent, but then slowly shift to be like, oh, here's Bitcoin. So in so many ways, it's changed my life. Like I didn't expect to be working full time in it, educating people about it, running a Bitcoin education platform. But for me personally, like without just holding Bitcoin, which I lost in a boating accident, unfortunately.
I know.
uh, yeah, it's made me understand money in general. Like things that we don't get taught at school, or at least I didn't get taught at school. It's forced me to then actually have to learn that. And then there's so many like tertiary things as well. You've got like the energy markets. I've been down many rabbit holes learning about energy. Um, and then like human psychology as well is a big one for me, because everything that we do is aimed at beginners. So educating new people about Bitcoin. And I need to, if I'm trying to market Bitcoin and tell people you should be learning about this thing, I need to understand why people would want to learn about it, and like the best approach to do that. So like I made many mistakes at the start of being too in your face Bitcoin. And it's like people get really defensive and they back away, and it's not the right approach. So it's finding what is the right approach to communicate this thing, because we all know it's an important thing to understand, but the key isn't just the communication. The key, no, the key isn't just the education. Sorry, the key is actually how you communicate that. Um, and that's been a big learning journey for me. And it kind of comes from Bitcoin, because it's this really difficult thing to understand. So how do I learn how to communicate this thing? And yeah, I think that's, yeah, I don't know if I went on for too long there. I think that answers
No.
both the questions.
Yeah. And then regarding the Genesis collective, yeah, what
Yeah.
key problems do you think you're solving, and how do you envision the collective advancing the Bitcoin
Yeah.
ecosystem?
Yeah. So at the moment we've got two platforms. So we've got like the Bitcoin Collective, which is more for your Bitcoiners, the people that understand Bitcoin. And what we do there is we've got a fairly big newsletter that goes out every week that just summarizes what's happened during that week in the Bitcoin space. Because I'm very much I want information fast, like short, sharp. So that's what we do in our newsletter is we'll give everything that's happened that week and we'll put links to everything. So if you want to go deeper, you can go deeper. You might not be interested in one thing, but you're interested in the other. So it's something that's designed you can read in like 3 to 5 minutes. So that's the Bitcoin Collective, and we'll put out some articles and stories as well. And then we made Genesis because, or we separated it from the Bitcoin Collective because we wanted something a little bit more neutral and not as I was saying earlier, like in your face Bitcoin. So like we changed all the colors, we branded it as something else, and this just allows us to soften the landing for new people coming in. It's not quite as scary because it is scary when you first learning about Bitcoin. It's overwhelming. There's so much that you can actually learn about, and there's so many rabbit holes that you can go down. Um, so with Genesis, we built this platform only for beginners, and that was the problem that I was seeing. I was seeing people once they get it, but it's getting it that's the problem. So it's how do we help people understand Bitcoin in a way that's relatable to them. And relatability kind of goes through everything that we do. Um, so we break everything down into like really simple terms. Because I think a lot of people in Bitcoin, they forget those early days when they were there. I certainly do. I'm really bad for it. And it's really complicated breaking these complex subjects down into bite-sized pieces that a beginner would understand. So, for example, decentralization, even the word decentralization, how does that then fit into money? And I remember at the start, it took me a long time to figure out like how does that actually work? So then it's showing you need to show how our current monetary system works and like how it how it operates in a very simplistic way. And then this is doing it a little bit differently in a decentralized way. So we're not just throwing around these words that we're used to, distributed, decentralized, blockchain, da 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 da. We're not just throwing those around and expecting people to understand it. We're actually trying to break it down and communicate it in a way that people would understand. Because a lot of people don't understand even investing, like a lot of investing terms. Inflation, you'll be surprised the amount of people that don't understand this. But when you think back, did I fully understand inflation before Bitcoin? I don't think so. So we have to really go into the nitty gritty and break these down without making it too boring is the key to it. Because when you hear the word inflation, you're like, ah, yeah, it sounds boring. But maybe not for Bitcoiners because we kind of understand it and we're protecting ourselves. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
Yeah, very, 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 very true. Yeah. And I didn't understand inflation and anything about money. I was good at making money, but I actually didn't understand what it was, how it works. So I had to restart rethinking everything after 48 years of being in the rat race, basically, and just figuring out, say, I'm working so hard, yeah, and we're working, our business is doing well. Why can't we just catch up though? Yeah, what's
yeah,
going on here? Until, some people took the time in 2020 when we had the time off to start learning again. Some people moved, some people sat around and just drank cans, you know, you
yeah.
know. I,
That
I
was
enjoyed myself, but I done a lot of learning as well. Yeah.
exactly that period of downtime that we had. Um, that was a real opportunity for a lot of people. I think because it was hand in hand with a lot of money getting printed at the same time, and then people had time to actually research what is Bitcoin. Um, but now as we're back to normality, people don't have that time anymore. It's you're back into the rat race. You're on the wheel again. Um, so how that's why we do everything fast is we'll explain this in 5 minutes. We'll explain this in 3 minutes, whatever it is, because people don't have the time to be. If you're first coming into Bitcoin and you get sent a 3 hour long Michael Saylor podcast. I've done this with friends, which is why this is what I'm referencing. They don't listen to it. They get 10 minutes in and they say, "Nah, I'm done."
Yeah.
So it's
And they get lost as well because they get overwhelmed, you know. So what you're saying, and what I'm getting from the way you like to educate people is to use the KISS methodology. Keep it stupid simple. You know what I mean? And just keep it simple. That's the best thing to do. And when I'm talking to people, and I went down that mistake as well myself. I used to be talking to people about Bitcoin and how great it is and this, but it was the wrong way. So now when I'm talking to people, I just say, okay, how are you protecting yourself from inflation?
mhm.
And I
Yeah,
just shut up.
that's the
And I
best way to
just,
do it.
how are you protecting yourself from inflation? And people start telling me, oh, I'm buying property, I'm buying gold, I'm doing this. I said, okay, well, let's look at the numbers. Let's look at the simple maths. How much are they going up every year? Yeah. How does that compare to inflation? Yeah. And how does that compare to the cost of money? Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know about the cost of money that has actually
Mm.
cost me. I live in Ireland. We use the euro here. It costs us approximately 13% a year uh, to have the privilege. And I'm not using that word privilege the way some people use it. We are privileged to be living in the Western world and being able to use sterling and euros. Yeah. People that can use dollars as well. Uh, and it is a privilege. We are very, very lucky. Yeah.
Mhm.
But we don't understand that most Western countries are running, the cost of that is between, say, 12 and 15%, depends where you are. And that's year on year. So if your business is not growing by that much, let's say 20% a year on year, the last 10 years, you're actually drowning,
Mhm.
but you don't know it because it's happening gradually. But if you're in Turkey, and last year I think they devalued by 40% in 1 year, then you're feeling it harder. But that's why people in the West, like us now, are feeling it. Because what happened in 2020 and 2021, yeah, and how much money they printed, we just started more feeling it in 2022 and 2023 because it takes a
Yeah.
little bit of time to catch up on us.
It's so true. And it's the one that I like to use is Michael Saylor calling it a melting ice cube, or his cash that he had on the balance sheet is a melting ice cube. I think that's such a good way of putting it, just slowly melting it away or slowly melting away over time. But unfortunately, a lot of people, even this, they don't understand. So like that's what we've had to adapt to is putting more simplistic investing education on there, and money in general, because yeah, a lot of people, even these concepts, don't understand it. So if I'm going to speak about Bitcoin, they're like, why Bitcoin? Because I'm okay at the moment. Um, whereas you need to highlight the problem a lot more and show them why they need Bitcoin rather than just going straight to Bitcoin, because that doesn't work. I've tried
Mm-hmm.
it many times. They need to have a pain point and you need to show them that, um, and put some figures behind it. So that's a really important part. And then especially living in the Western world as well, is that it's more angling it towards their family and investing and protecting your wealth, rather than focusing on really anything else. Like the payments, people understand it and they get it. And like that's a huge part. Like that's why Bitcoin was created, is an electronic peer-to-peer cash system. But people resonate a lot more with I'm in pain because I'm finding it harder with the cost of living. How do I actually protect myself against this? So coming in with that angle, and how do I protect my family as well? That's a big thing that we're seeing, is people wanting to set their kids up for future. And this is an important part of that because they see the world is changing. And this is why they want to learn about Bitcoin.
Yeah, definitely. And the world is changing, and it's going to be changing really fast now, I believe, from 2025 when they start launching all this new AI and robotics and androids, and there's a lot of stuff coming. Yeah. And a lot of people are going to be in awe when they start seeing this stuff in front of them. Like, just say, even if they walk into a hotel and instead of a receptionist, they might have an android there standing there and
Mm-hmm.
checking them in. Yeah, they might think it's funny at the beginning. Oh, it's all fun and games and all, but they don't really understand what's going on behind the scenes. Yeah, but all this new technology should be making life easier for us. But
Yep.
unfortunately, because of the fiat system, yeah, things are getting harder and harder and harder because of all this money printing and all this fiat debasement that's going on.
Yep.
And it's just out of control. So there's no point, I don't think, waiting for your policymakers or your government to help you. You need to take
Mm-hmm.
action now, yeah, and start
Definitely.
learning and protecting your family.
Yeah. I was I go on LinkedIn quite a lot. Like that's my place to post stuff because I'm very much of trying to get out of the echo chamber and like get to new people. People want to learn about Bitcoin, or don't really know about it yet. And LinkedIn seems to be a good place for me to hang out. And yesterday I replied to the founder of Brewdog, and he was saying exactly what you're saying there is like especially the situation in the UK that we've got is like the government, like, are you just going to wait for the government to do this and make changes, or are you actually going to like do something yourself? And he's just laying out how bad the situation is in the UK with taxes and how short-sighted and short-term they are and not very innovative. And I just backed them up. I was like, yeah, this is like we've got a 5-year election cycle and all they care about is winning the next election. So they're just going to do things for that rather than actually for the people and for the long term. And this is the problem that we're in at the moment. It's such short term vision is whereas you need to be looking for the long term. And currently, the way governments are set up, it's not. Like in America, it's 4-year cycles, and here is 5-year cycles. Um, so I mean, Bitcoin is such a long-term thing that I think that's I guess I'll add that to how has it changed my life. It's made me think way longer term as well, and lowered my time preference, and it's that's been really like change a big change that I've seen. Actually, I'll tell you a story. The book that got me into Bitcoin was The Fourth Turning. I don't know if you've read it, but it's not a Bitcoin book at all. Um, but what it shows is the cycles that we go through, or showed the cycles
Oh
that
yeah,
America
I've
go
heard
through.
it. Yeah, I've heard about the
Yeah,
different cycles like that. Yeah, but explain
yeah.
it though
So
anyway. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
so you've got 80-year cycles, and it goes through periods of calm, and then you got periods of unrest. And then you get the fourth turning, which finishes the cycle and starts a new one. And typically at the end of the fourth cycle, you get something destructive. You get a war. So World War II, for example, was our last one. And or maybe it could be I don't know. It could be anything, but something very destructive that changes um, the course. And it goes into the side thing that I quite liked about it was it shows the different characteristics of different generations. and what they're born into. So if you're born into a time of calm, then you'll be this, that, and the other. I can't remember it off the top of my head. Or if you're born through time of unrest, you'll be way more resilient because you're used to going through those hardships as you're growing up. But what this book done for me was it made me zoom out and really look at the bigger picture of, yeah, we do go through cycles. And then if you overlay this with, I don't know if you've seen any of Ray Dalio's, yeah, so like his Changing World Order, that book is, I really rate the book. And some of his research that he's done just into currencies and the life of currencies over the years, really interesting. And I think a lot of people are just set in the way, and this is where I was as well, set in the way of this is just the way it is. Whereas if you look at some of the history, or you can go right back, like way back if you want, depends how far you want to go down the rabbit hole. But you can see that we go through rough patterns, and you can also see that we are evolving. So you've gone from barter to shells, in form of money anyway, barter to shells, to coins. And then if you look at like the Roman Empire as well, it's a very similar situation to what we are in right now with the governments. So that's another thing I'd like to add is it's changed my life. It's made me zoom out and actually look at the bigger picture.
Yeah. When I started understanding what Bitcoin was and about money, I made a 4-year plan. Then I upped it to a 10-year plan. But now I'm thinking 100 years out. That's how my mind has changed and how far I'm zooming out. And to the normal person, they probably think like, what is he talking about? 100 years? Like I'd be like them though. Like 2 or 3 years ago, thinking like, oh, next year, what's going to happen next year? But now the way we're planning, and when you look at all big entities and big corporations and big families, that's what they do. They think out 100 years. Yeah. And that's
Yeah,
how, and they achieve their goals. Yeah, man. But they need to put in the steps of the ladder to get to that goal. Yeah.
so true. And it's like what we used to be good at as well. It's if you look at any large structure or seven wonders of the world, like they're built over generations. So like this was planned out at the start. Let's take the pyramids of Giza, for example. Um, I who knows how they were built. Let's not go down that rabbit hole. Um, but large structures like that were built over generations. So it was something was planned out at the start and is evolved and it's gone through. So people have not seen it, the finished product, but they've contributed their whole life to building it. And I really like that aspect of it. And I guess that resonates with Bitcoin as well. And one thing I just wrote about last week was talking about the similarities between MicroStrategy and McDonald's. Um, so bear with me. Uh, so McDonald's, they've been around for nearly 100 years. I think it's 85-ish. But I say I use McDonald's because it's relatable. People understand it, and this is where I kind of come from with Bitcoin in general. But so McDonald's have lasted for so long because they aren't actually a food business. They're a real estate business. They are one of the largest real estate companies in the world. They've got, I think it was $43 billion worth of real estate on their balance sheets as of 2023. And if I'm remembering these stats correctly, it's 38%. So their rental income is 38% of their revenue, their annual revenue. So they're protected by the assets that they actually have. People see it from the outside as this multi-billion-dollar food chain, but actually the reason why they've managed to withstand all the storms that have been thrown at them is because they've got a very, very large balance sheet of property, which kind of builds a financial moat around their day-to-day operations. They're protected. And I used this to then show you MicroStrategy, because Michael Saylor says, and I won't get this quote exactly right, but you need to build a company for 100 years, not just 10 years. I'm paraphrasing, it's something along those lines. And that's exactly what MicroStrategy are doing with Bitcoin, is they're but just digital property. They are building up their balance sheet so then they can last centuries instead of decades. And I really like that analogy, and people should be thinking long term like that into the centuries. Like, what are your kids for your kids and for your kids' kids? And I think we've lost that a little bit just because a lot of people are stuck in that rat race of just trying to survive, which is fair enough. That's the world at the moment, but you need to do a bit of learning to come out of that, as you said at the start.
Yeah. And that boils all down to the system that we use. That's fiat system. It traps you in the rat race. Yeah. And when 2020 came along and we were all sitting around, some of us decided to look around, what's really going on here? Yeah. Some of us decided to just chill out and do nothing and play games. You know what I mean? Or do whatever they done. Yeah. But it's after helping me and my family. Yeah, because we were all sitting in there watching stuff like this. And thank God my partner as well, Laura, she sat there and watched it and she got it as well. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I'm kind of blessed to have somebody like a partner of mine that really gets Bitcoin,
Yeah.
and we understand it's the future for uh ourselves and our family. Yeah. And that's like part of my program as well. My podcast, I call it What is Money? What is Coming? Yeah, and how to protect your family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so true. It's great that you're like your family get it as well, because I think that's a big stumbling block for people is one person gets it and then it's trying to how do you teach the other person? Because then because it does shift your mindset. It's why do we have this house? Why are we not renting? Or um, why do we have this extra property? We could move that into Bitcoin. And I think if there's two of you, one of you gets it, one of you doesn't, it's very difficult dynamic. Um, so yeah, it's really important that yeah, the whole family understands it and is taking on that journey as well. I totally
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah. I'd be talking to people now, and they get Bitcoin, but their partners don't. Yeah. And they have a couple of properties, and they're instead of buying Bitcoin instead of the next property, they're still being pushed down the same old route and the road that they were going down, and they're gonna buy another property because their partner doesn't get it. You know what I mean? And I know that's hard. Sometimes you need to just make that decision and just do it. You know what I mean? And it works out better in the long run. Yeah.
Yeah,
The maths just works out better. Yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
It is, yeah, it's taking, because it does take time as well, is the problem. It takes time to understand um Bitcoin to a to a decent extent. I don't believe that we can ever fully understand it, because it evolves every day. It changes. Keeping up with it's very difficult, even for people inside of Bitcoin and the people who understand it, keeping up is very difficult. But yeah, learning to a certain level is very important. And a thing that I think that we do quite well is those early days of when you're in Bitcoin. A lot of people forget about it. So for example, sending your first on-chain Bitcoin transaction. For me, I was so scared for 10 minutes. I was like, I sent it and I was like, what do I do now? For 10 minutes, I was pacing around. I remember exactly where I was. And I was pacing around and I was like, is it gonna land? Like, is it gonna show up here? Um, and this was like 2017. So like the user experience was awful back then compared to what it is now. Like awful. And yeah, because I had to learn at that point, I had to learn like everything you would for being a trader almost of like limit orders, market orders, exactly how to place these because it wasn't as easy back then just to click. I want £500 and it just does it all for you. Um, yeah, there's a big fee that they'll take on that by doing it that way. Um, but yeah, the user experience wasn't that easy back then. I'm glad now it is. It's getting better, which makes it a lot easier for people to just buy a little bit of Bitcoin and even just buying like £10 worth to start with, or €10 worth or $10. I think that's really powerful for people because then they get to see what it's like, the fluctuations. Because that's the hardest, or that's a hard part for people is the volatility in the short term. And that before you realize that, oh, I should be zooming out a little bit
Mm,
more.
yeah.
Um, it's a good little test that we not test, but thing that we recommend people to do. Although not
Yeah.
financial advice, any of that is just saying if you want to buy some, just buy a little bit and just play around with it first. Get used to it.
Yeah, definitely. And then something that you touched on there, the volatility. Once you learn about Bitcoin, the volatility is actually a feature,
Mhm.
you know? It is, yeah. And zoom out. Just start zooming out. That's what it's all about, yeah. Don't zoom in. Stop zooming in. Yeah. Don't be a trader. Be a saver. Yeah.
Yeah,
And just keep
exactly.
stacking over time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Make
just
a
it's
plan.
just yeah, it's a savings account is the best thing to look at it. Just put in, you get your paycheck, however much you can afford to save or how much you'd put into a savings account. Just put that in and dollar cost average in. And it takes a lot of the emotion out of it as well, because a lot of people try to time the market, um, which I would never recommend. Um, so yeah, it's dollar cost averaging. I would always say is the best approach when you're first coming in because you're not exposed to that volatility as much. Whereas if you put in, say you wanted to put in, let's say £5,000, or €5,000, and you put it in at set when it was at $72,000, and it drops to where it is now, I think it's 60. Like people will get scared, and the common thing that I see is, oh, when it gets back to 72, I'll cash out because then I'm level again.
Mm,
And this is not a good approach. It's just put in small amounts whilst you're learning. Um, is the best approach that I've seen people and most successful that I've seen people go on anyway.
yeah, yeah. I'd like to touch on a little bit about the adoption of Bitcoin in the UK and how you've seen it growing over time. Yeah. Now
Yeah.
I know it has been ramped up since the last halving cycle in the last 4 years. Yeah, but uh what can you see? There's been reports coming out from the big asset management firms like BlackRock, yeah, about the adoption rate. But on the ground yourself, what are
Mm-hmm.
you seeing yourself?
Yeah. It's tricky in the UK. It's very tricky because we don't have access to a lot of stuff. Like we don't have access to any of the ETFs or anything like that. So a lot of people will get indirect exposure to Bitcoin through MicroStrategy. This is just a side. This is like a common thing that I'm seeing, and what I would love to see is I don't think this data is public, but the percentage of people from the UK buying into MicroStrategy just because we don't have access to any of the tools that are over there. Because the FCA here are very, very strict around crypto assets in general. So in terms of a regulatory point of view, it's very slow, very, very slow. And we talk to wealth managers, asset managers here in the UK, and it's coming. It is coming. Hopefully next year, the FCA will loosen up a little bit more, and that will bring hopefully a lot more people into the space because well, I'm a believer that the ETFs, although you're not holding Bitcoin directly, what it's done for the credibility of Bitcoin and the marketing of Bitcoin is invaluable. It's done a lot for Bitcoin. But then people, as long as people understand that these ETFs aren't actually, although they are spot ETFs, you don't actually have that Bitcoin. And I think that's the next stumbling block that we're going to have to get over is people saying I own Bitcoin, but then the next question will be, is it Bitcoin or is it the Bitcoin ETF? And I think that'll be over the next few years, that'll be a common trend. Maybe people moving out of the ETFs into actually directly holding Bitcoin, which I hope, with fingers crossed. But on back to Bitcoin and the UK in general, yeah, I'm seeing a lot of like over the last 2 to 3 years, like the meetup scene has exploded. The amount of merchants accepting Bitcoin is, yeah, again exploded. Like there's been so many, which has been great to see. And even if they aren't getting a lot of traction through them or a lot of payments through them, you've got a sticker on the outside that says accept Bitcoin. I think that's really powerful is people will be walking past and seeing, oh, I didn't know that you could accept Bitcoin because a lot of people still have in their head it's slow and really clunky. So it then gets them asking the question, well, how does that work? Do I need to hang around for 10 minutes, 20 minutes until it's confirmed? Well, obviously they won't know that if they're a beginner. They wouldn't know that it was 10-minute time. But it gets them thinking. And if that sticker's next to the Visa, the MasterCard, the Amex, that's really powerful. So we're seeing that a lot more in the UK of merchants accepting Bitcoin. And shout out to Ashley Giles, who's actually done a lot of work. So Ashley Giles on Twitter, a lot of work getting merchants accepting Bitcoin. And most recently, the Tooting Market in London. So it's one of the oldest, I think that's right, one of the oldest food markets in the UK. And I think there's Bridge to Bitcoin as well. I can't forget them. They've done wonders. Yeah, absolute wonders. And they're like the dream team. So Ashley Giles and Bridge to Bitcoin, because Ashley gets the intros and does all the sales, and then Bridge to Bitcoin come in with the tech. But yeah, they've got Tooting Market, and it's a really cool place. I've been quite a few times, and when people come to it and they don't really understand Bitcoin, or they've got a preconceived idea of what it was back in 2017, really slow, and we didn't have the Lightning Network back then. To then be like, well, I can pick up my phone and I can go to the shawarma place and I can get my shawarma wrap and pay in Bitcoin, and they see that and they're like, oh, okay, I'm kind of understanding this now. So the payments angle is really accelerating, I would say, in the UK. That's what I'm seeing. But on a regulatory standpoint and big picture is very slow in the UK.
Yeah, but the thing about it is, Bitcoin's not going to wait for anyone. It's going to keep on chugging along, going to keep on chugging. If the regulators want to take longer and longer to do what they need to do, you know,
Yeah,
like in the end of the day, can they really control it? You know, people might be thinking that what they're waiting for this regulation before they get in. You know, we're seeing the way things are moving. Yeah, if people want to wait till 2026 or 2027, they'll just pay the price at the time.
exactly. Exactly. It's yeah, it's that is what we're seeing. Like individuals are starting to um buy Bitcoin, learn about Bitcoin, but it's when we because we talk to a lot of like businesses and institutions here, and their hands are tied because of the regulation. But behind the scenes, internally, there's a lot of people just buying Bitcoin, but they can't do anything externally quite yet until it's loosened up with the FCA. But you're right,
Yeah.
it doesn't wait for anyone. It'll just keep going.
Just keep going and doing its thing, don't it? Yeah. Okay. Lovely, Jordan. I know we have a hard stop there now in a few minutes. Yeah. What I'd like to do, if anybody wants to get in touch with you, yeah, how do they get in touch with you? Just give
uh,
yourself a shout out.
yeah, so you can either go to the BitcoinCollective.co or genesiscollective.co, which is our education platform. If you want to find me, I'm mostly on LinkedIn, Jordan Walker, or you can find me on X, which is J J Walker, uh, JW132 is what it is. My
We'll put all
handle.
the links in the description below anyway.
Amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
in
And
case I got that wrong.
if you've enjoyed this podcast, give it a like, give it a share, and subscribe. And Jordan, we will hopefully meet up in person sometime, yeah, soon. And you're more than welcome to come over to the Bitcoin Ireland conference. Yeah.
I'd love
Love to
that.
have you over and love to see you in person. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Let's do it. Thank you very
Okay.
much for having me.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.